Of US politics, this evening's Global Speakers Series discussion here in UCC. We're delighted to welcome everyone who's with us here this evening in the Western Gateway building, and also all of you who are joining us remotely from around the world. We would especially like to thank Deloitte, the sponsors of UCC's Global Speakers Series. The Global Speaker Series brings together experts from the alumni community with specialists from UCC to discuss topics of contemporary interest and to explore some of the opportunities and challenges facing our world today. This evening, we're delighted to welcome our excellent guest speakers, Ambassador Dan Mulhall and Ambassador Kevin O'Malley, who will be introduced to you shortly by Professor Thia Hennessy. Before handing you over to Thia, I'm delighted to welcome Kevin Butler of Deloitte. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you for the welcome, Karen. As Karen mentioned, my name is Kevin Butler. I'm an audit partner in Deloitte, and we're delighted to be associated with the Global Speaker Series programme and to be here with you tonight to listen to this fascinating conversation. I say that particularly as a proud UCC alumni myself. I was reflecting on today and kind of thought about the event tonight, and it happening very close to St. Patrick's Day. And St. Patrick's Day for me is a time when we all reflect on being Irish and reflect on our Irish roots. And nowhere to me is that more obvious than in the United States. And when I look at Deloitte as an organisation, we're the largest professional services firm in the world. We're globally headquartered out of the US, but with a huge legacy in Ireland, and particularly in Cork. 148 years ago this year, our Irish practice was founded right here in Cork. And I think when you're in business that long, you realise that over those many generations, the connection between Ireland and the US has been so important, both for society and for business. And I think sometimes when you reflect on the US contribution to Ireland, we naturally gravitate to FDI. But to me, it's actually been far more deeper than that. It's about, in many ways, bringing peace to our island and the US contribution to that. But in a lot of cases, we forget about the significance of Ireland's impact to the US, and that of our people, whether in spheres of politics, whether in sporting endeavours or other cultural aspects. And many of you might have seen this morning that AmCham released a report and noticed that Ireland is the 9th largest contributor to FDI in the US, which is a pretty remarkable number when you consider on our most recent census we were a population of about 5.1 million people. And I often think about that 5.1 million people, and we're probably a bigger number today, kind of 2 years on. But in the most recent US census, there was 38.5 million people connected with being Irish, which again is a phenomenal number and really to me highlights the connection between these two countries. And that is a connection that's really driven by many shared values. I was thinking about coming across campus today in UCC, and I mentioned to ambassadors earlier, it reminded me of when I came to UCC for the very first time. I left Waterford and moved to Cork. And my economics teacher at the time used a phrase that he said that when America sneezes, the world catches cold. And for us as budding business students at that time, it was to highlight the importance that America has to play to the world economy, which was particularly relevant to a small open economy such as Ireland. But when you reflect on that a little bit more now, to me actually that's a lot about leadership. And it's where America leads, the rest of the world tends to follow. And that's why, for all of us here in the room tonight and those online, hearing the views of Ambassadors Mulhall and O'Malley is so important to what that future looks like. So I, for one, are really excited to be here tonight. As I mentioned, our firm is really delighted to associate with the event. I hope you enjoy the evening, enjoy the conversation as much as I do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, everybody, alumni, colleagues, guests. You're very welcome to UCC. My name is Thia Hennessy. I'm the head of the College of Business and Law here in UCC. I never thought my picture would be over a banner that says the future of US politics. I'm not running for any office or anything. I'm just facilitating the discussion tonight. So I'm really honoured to be sitting between two esteemed guests here, two ambassadors. And I have to read the biographies, which I don't like to do, but they're so detailed. I want to get it right. So first of all, to my left, Ambassador Dan Mulhall, also a Waterford man, Kevin, and also an alumnus of UCC. Dan graduated with an MA in 1978. He's a former Irish diplomat, and he has served as ambassador for Ireland in Malaysia, Germany, the UK, and most recently the US. Since his retirement, he has been the Global Distinguished Professor of Irish Studies at Glucksman House, Ireland, New York University, Parnell Fellow at Magdalen College, Cambridge, and a resident fellow at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University. He's joined this evening as well by his wife, Mrs. Mulhall. You're very welcome to UCC, and thanks for joining us. To my right, I also have an ambassador, Ambassador Kevin O'Malley. Kevin O'Malley was appointed the United States Ambassador to Ireland by President Barack Obama and confirmed by the full United States Senate in 2014. During his tenure as ambassador, he worked to expand and deepen the commercial and cultural connections between Ireland and the US. He is the ambassador in residence and professor of practice at St. Louis University Law School, his alma mater, where he has taught civil and procedural and trial advocacy there. He accompanied President Biden on his recent trip to Ireland. He's active in democratic politics, and most importantly, in your biography, he's adjunct professor of law here in UCC. So you're both very welcome back to UCC, and thank you for taking the time out to join us this evening. I had prepared a whole list of questions last night, but then we were all taken by surprise by an announcement today at noon, so I can't let the evening go by starting and maybe asking Ambassador Mulhall first to reflect on the Taoiseach's announcement today, what has led up to that, and what you feel the repercussions will be in Ireland and more internationally.
Well, I mean, interesting that he should have chosen to announce his resignation just days after his visit to the United States. There were those who called for a boycott of the White House this year. That would have been crazy, frankly. I remember when I was in Washington, my European colleagues were agog at the fact that Ireland, little Ireland, every year got this extraordinary exposure whereby the entire political establishment in Washington put on their green ties and turned up for a series of events to celebrate St. Patrick's Day, to celebrate Ireland, and to celebrate Ireland's connections with the United States. So I look back on Leo Varadkar's tenure as Taoiseach, and I feel that he did a decent job. I know not everyone agrees with this, and I see on social media lots of bitter, vitriolic criticism of him. But for me, at least, he had the job as Taoiseach at a very difficult time, coping with COVID, coping with the fallout from Brexit, which is always going to be a problem for Ireland, and coping more recently with the impact of the war in Ukraine, the first major war on the European continent in more than 7 decades. These were huge challenges. Every incumbent government in Europe and indeed around the world is struggling with the range of issues that are currently having to be dealt with. I think when history looks back on his tenure, they will say he did a decent job. Obviously, I assume that he just got tired of the burdens of this office, of the criticism, of the 24/7 nature of politics these days, and just didn't feel he had enough gas in the tank to go another round and to stand for as a party leader for another general election. So I wish him well in the future. I'm sure we will hear more of him again in the years to come. But for the moment, I think we should be grateful to everyone that agrees to serve in public life at this particular time, when being in public life means you're exposed to sometimes the most bitter and vitriolic of criticism, and to be able to stand up to that requires a certain amount of backbone and fibre. And I think we're lucky to have a group of politicians who can do that, and who've given Ireland quite good leadership over the last 20 years.
Thanks, Ambassador, and I know you'll be speaking on this topic on Sky News later tonight.
I
so
will
if you
indeed.
want to hear more,
I will
you can
indeed.
tune in.
I'm just practicing.
So that was your. That
It'll
was
have to
the
be
dry
shorter
run.
on Sky because I'm thinking to a British audience. But anyway, I shall do my best.
So Ambassador O'Malley, you were in the White House earlier in the week and you met the Taoiseach, and I think as Irish people we take it for granted that our leader gets to go there once a year and present the bowl of shamrock, but it's really a significant opportunity for Ireland, isn't it?
So I wish I could invite all of you to be in the White House around St. Patrick's Day. It started out as a day, and then now it's Patrick's Week, and really it's Patrick's Month, where Washington, D.C. is invaded by your countrymen, and they get a full hearing. If an Irishman knocks on the door of Congress or of the White House or of the courts, they get a hearing. And that is an opportunity that no other nation on this planet has. And there are a number of reasons for that, but as Kevin pointed out, the most recent survey said that there are 38 million Americans who claim Irish ancestry of some degree or another. And 38 million is a big number, even for my country. But the important part of that sentence is not the number, it's the word claimed. 30 million, 38 million of my fellow Americans want to identify with Brand Ireland. Okay, that I don't know how you put that into dollars or euros, but that's priceless. That is a connection that is, and long may it continue, that exists on the personal level, on the political level, on the cultural level. The multinational corporations that are here doing well, the Irish corporations in the United States that are doing well. There are a number of reasons why all that works so well, and why what started out, my grandparents sending a few dollars back here at Christmas time. I mean, I remember my grandparents who left Westport in 1910 with 7 children and $20. Them sending back a few dollars every year at Christmas. And that was the extent of the Irish-American economic system then. And now look what we've got. And it's a wonderful thing. And I think Dan and I both had a chance to see that at a wonderful, wonderful level. And, long may it continue.
Thank you. And you mentioned there the economic development in Ireland, and I think much of it is thanks to the connections with the US. And I suppose the economy is really important coming into this election. There seems to be a perception that Biden hasn't been good for the economy. This seems to be dividing the electorate in the US. So in your view, how important is the economy coming into the election? And also how important is the election for the economy in the context of the impact here in Ireland? Kevin said, if America sneezes and the world gets a cold, we must get pneumonia here in Ireland because we're even more closely connected, I think, to the American economy.
So we've gone about 4 minutes, and then we're now into American politics. Okay, good. First of all, my bias. I think President Joe Biden, excuse me, is a wonderful leader, and I am supporting his reelection in the United States with every breath that I draw. So the issue of the American economy, by all objective standards, by every objective standards, the economy in the United States is doing quite well. It's probably leading the world. GDP is high, unemployment is low, inflation is coming down faster in the United States than it is in any other developed country. We're doing just fine. Most Americans feel that that's not accurate. And they feel that that's not accurate because they are continually told day in and day out by the right-wing media that the economy is terrible. Despite all of Kevin's partners at Deloitte, who will do all the numbers, will tell you just the opposite, but they've been told day in and day out, that the economy is bad. And they'll pick one thing or another, the price of eggs, which has nothing to do with anything except avian flu and supply chains and all that sort of thing. And so that is one of the reasons why President Biden's popularity, the polling numbers are so low. I think that will change, but that's a different topic. Our economy is doing well. We welcome, the fact that this small country of Ireland is the 9th largest provider of FDI in the United States. I mean, that's really kind of mind-boggling when you think about it. And most people wouldn't know that. I preach it all day long in the U.S. because that economic relationship is not a one-way thing. It's a two-way bridge that's getting wider and stronger every year, and it's part of the reason why the U.S. economy is doing so well.
Very good. And Dan, for you, the connection between the Irish and US economy, 15% of people in Ireland employed by American companies, and that statistic from Kevin on FDI. So it's a two-way flow. Your role as an ambassador, how important was that, and what's the secret to our success in terms of?
Well, very important. I always prioritized economic diplomacy, but especially in the United States, where the relevance of it is just so obvious. America is our biggest export market. It's our biggest source of foreign investment. It's probably the biggest target for Irish investment overseas. Used to be Britain, but because of Brexit, I think a lot of Irish companies looking to expand now are looking towards the United States for options. I think there are 750 US companies with investments in Ireland, employing about 70,000 Irish people. But there are 800 Irish companies, Irish-owned companies in the United States, employing 140,000. So it won't be long, in my view, before there are more people working for Irish companies in the US than there are people working for American companies in Ireland. So that's been a huge turnaround, but also a very positive one for both countries, I would say. And then finally, you've got the number of American tourists. I don't have the figures for the last couple of years because obviously been affected by COVID, but in 2019, the last year before the pandemic, there were 2 million Americans visited Ireland. In fact, 10% of all the Americans who visited Europe visited Ireland that year. Extraordinary figure, given that we have about 1% of the population of the European continent, and yet 10% of Americans visiting Europe came to Ireland. So those are unanswerable statistics, and I don't see that changing, to be honest with you, because I think although there now is a move in America towards reshoring, I think we can make the argument that Ireland and other European countries are, if you like, part of the wider American area of interest, and that there's no risk to America from production taking place in Ireland, because there is no conceivable world in which Irish exports to the US or Irish investments back and forth between Ireland and the US are going to be affected by political difficulties, for example. And that's where that obviously does apply in other parts of the world. So I understand the American push to reshore some production in America, but I think Ireland will be able to make the case strongly that we can be an asset to the American economy, that we can be of value to the United States as we are today, and we can be that in the future as well.
Yeah, I apologize for some of those American tourists that have been here. Sometimes we get here and we forget our manners, but so please forgive us.
I want to ask Dan a question, because I know you can't imagine this as a future scenario if Trump wins the next election. What do you think that means for the economic relationship between Ireland and the US, and for what you just spoke about, reshoring? Is it a risk? Or?
Well, first of all, if Trump were to be re-elected, it's not the Irish-US relationship that would worry me. It's the US relationship with the rest of the world, and in particular with the European Union. Because Trump, during his speeches in recent times, has said that he proposes to put a 10% tariff on all imports into the United States, thereby totally abandoning all the kind of trade rules that have been developed painstakingly over the last 50 plus years. That would inevitably result in retaliation from the European Union. So there would then be a full-blown trade war between the United States and the European Union, and that would be bad for everyone. It'd be bad for Europe, bad for Ireland, bad for the United States, and bad for the world, because there would be huge disruption in the global economy, and I would say very likely a recession, and adding to the problems created by the war in Ukraine, by the backwash from COVID and so forth. So economically, there's a huge risk in Donald Trump being re-elected. I mean, I'm not taking a partisan position here. I'm simply stating a fact that, apart from other factors you might want to discuss about American politics, which I'm happy to go into, but on the economic front, I would say the idea of slapping a 10% tariff on all imports would be hugely detrimental to the global economy and therefore to Ireland.
And didn't we have something like that? Was it in 2019 over the Airbus dispute, and there was tariffs imposed?
But that was a drop in the ocean compared with a 10% tariff on everything.
Yes,
I mean, that was a tariff. That tariff, very unfairly, in my view, hit Ireland because there's not a single job in Ireland that's connected with the Airbus project. In fact, we're probably one of the biggest buyers of Boeing aircraft in the world, because Ryanair flies an entirely Boeing manufactured fleet, plus the other companies that are leasing aircraft from Ireland, they also buy huge numbers of Boeing. So we were a huge buyer, and yet our butter was hit with a tariff, our cream liqueurs, and our cheese, all hit with tariffs. Now, happily, those tariffs have since been removed. I think, in fairness, Ornua, who are the company responsible for exporting Kerrygold to the US, which is found, by the way, in every US shop has Kerrygold. If they have any butter, it's Kerrygold butter, and it's a huge success story. They managed to hold their market share despite the impact of the tariff. But had the tariff gone on for much longer, obviously it would have badly affected the marketability of Kerrygold in the United States, which is one of the Irish products that really does hit the main street. Most Irish products, products that are produced by the high-tech companies here wouldn't be identifiably Irish, but Kerrygold certainly is one product that is. So yeah, I remember lobbying quite strongly on that front for more than a year. We did manage to avoid having tariffs imposed on Irish whiskey, for which I think we can be grateful, because our whiskey industry has been able to develop very substantially over the last number of years, mainly because of its access to the US market.
Right. Do you use Kerrygold, Kevin?
Every good Irish person.
There's only one answer to that question.
I'm trying to climb out of the depression of a Trump election.
Okay. Tell us what you think about that.
I don't think it'll happen. So here's my a 10% tariff would be about the least of the things that scare me with the Trump reelection. So let's do the what I'm about to tell you. I believe this is just not trying to put a happy face on a very scary thing. In my view, Donald Trump has been a quite transformative figure on our planet and in our country. I can't think of one positive thing about that. It's totally negative, and I've thought about this a great deal. Could I come up with one thing? I can't. But here's the story. I mean, we can talk about this for a couple of hours, but I would do it in a paragraph. I would do this. First of all, politics in any country, certainly in the United States, is a game of addition. You must find new people. Trump can't do that. He can consolidate what he has. There are people in the United States who would die for him, literally die for him. But he can't add people to that coalition. And let me just give you the most recent example. The examples happen all the time. But the most recent example was about 2 weeks ago, when the Republican primaries essentially ended. A former governor of North Carolina by the name of Nikki Haley was essentially eliminated from this. And she had run a pretty credible campaign, a very attractive candidate. sort of, compared to Trump, middle of the road. Actually, she's sort of on the right side. But Hillary Clinton wrote in one of her books this sentence, which I think describes things. She said, "The radicalization of American politics has not been symmetrical." Think about that. I mean, that's, the right has pulled us way over to where we used to be. Nikki Haley would have been a far-right conservative a few years ago, but because of Trump, she's sort of just, she's sort of in the middle. Anyway, so Nikki Haley gets bumped out of the Republican primary. Trump derided her and her followers, made fun of her, made fun of the people who endorsed her, who were supporting her. Well, we'll pick up. Okay. I'm speaking here just as an individual, but I am a big fan of President Biden. Biden will pick up 30, maybe 50% of those people. Trump couldn't add them. They were there for the picking, but he couldn't do it. He had to be the bully, egomaniac that he is, and he had to make fun of a candidate rather than trying to add to his coalition. He offended a lot of them, and will pick up. President Biden will pick up a percentage of them. So I think in the long run, President Biden will win. Remembering that in the last election, President Biden pulled up 7 million more votes than Trump, and in the Electoral College it was even a greater majority. Now, as you all understand, there were, because of our Electoral College, the vote in some of the key states was closer than any of us would have liked, and we have our problems there. But I don't think that I don't think you're going to have to worry about a 10% tariff on your stuff. I'm taking a couple of days off after this trip, and I'll be back working on the campaign to try to make that happen.
Just a really interesting observation there about Trump and Haley and how he reacted. And I think if you contrast that to when Obama and Clinton were running against one another, and then he brought her in. And
absolutely,
and it's just a different approach, isn't it? A different attitude.
And she did a good job.
Yeah, yeah. I want to move on from the economy, and I think it's very important that we do talk about the geopolitical situation, and in particular the terrible situation in Israel. News getting worse day by day, and I'll start with you, Kevin. Maybe, I suppose, just your reflection on it first of all, and then, do you think the US is doing enough? Do you think Ireland and the EU are doing enough? Can you see any light at the end of the tunnel?
So let me again, we talk on this for hours and hours, and I understand it is a very hot topic here in Ireland. It is also, I can tell you, a very hot topic in the United States. So let me start off by saying, I think that the situation as it exists between Israel and Palestine at the moment is clearly the most complicated issue in the world right now, and maybe the most complicated issue that we've ever had. It's a very difficult situation. I read the comments especially from the Irish press, and in our own press. It is a complicated issue. We are we have supported Israel clearly from the very beginning, and we understand that the Ireland and Irish people have been much more sympathetic to the Palestinian plight than we have been. We have treaty after treaty after treaty with Israel. As we look at this situation each day, and as it unfolds, we're bound by certain agreements that we've made. So we don't come at this like, okay, now this is all brand new. We have made promises, and those promises sometimes are painful. I believe that I happen to know President Biden. I believe he is absolutely racked by this and is doing everything that he can with all of the powers that he has and the powers that he doesn't have to get a ceasefire in place, the hostages returned, and a two-state solution looked at. That's really all I can say about this. I know that he is. Well, you've seen. I mean, you all have seen the reports in our press about the disagreements that are going on in the United States. We are re-examining our positions on things. This is a sea change in many ways for us, and the only thing I can say of comfort to you, because I would assume that everyone here, just like everyone in the U.S., wants this resolved tomorrow, if not tonight. The only thing that I can say of comfort is I cannot think of any world leader that I'd rather have working on this problem than a mature, peaceful, compassionate person like Joe Biden. He isn't writing on a blank sheet of paper here. There are things that will push him one way or the other, but he knows these people. He understands as well as anybody who probably doesn't live in the Middle East what the situation is, and he's working. I literally don't think it's an exaggeration to say night and day to try to get this, try to get proportionality involved in this and to get this resolved quickly.
And when you were in the White House, how were Leo Varadkar's comments received? Did they have an impact?
Absolutely. Your views, the views of the Irish are just taken on board. I don't know how to say it other than that. I mean, we, I've heard the expression "punch above your weight" and all that. I mean, what the Taoiseach said in the presence of the president and a number of leaders of Congress was heard, understood. He spoke, I thought, eloquently. I thought he spoke clearly. He understood who was listening, and I think made you proud. Made you proud.
Thank you. Dan, can I ask you to reflect maybe not just on the role of the US, but the EU as well?
Can we talk about something nice after that, too?
We're getting on to something nice now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's clearly a terrible tragedy, a catastrophe, I think for all sides, really, because Israel suffered hugely on the 7th of October, and Palestinians have been suffering since then. And so this is a situation that needs to be resolved, and the only solution that I can think of, or anyone else can think of, is a two-state solution. But to arrive at that, we first of all got to end the conflict, end the violence. I mean, we learned that in Northern Ireland, where it took a long time. Peace came dropping slow in Northern Ireland, but eventually we did manage to get a peace process in place and did manage to come up with a formula. I was proud to be there on that day in 1998 when the Good Friday Agreement was finally concluded, and it saved huge numbers of lives in Northern Ireland. And we saw last week the First Minister and Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland together in Washington promoting Northern Ireland as a location for US investment with the encouragement of the American administration. So one thing is not going to change. Israel is a close ally of the United States, and that's not going to change. I think what has changed in the United States is that attitudes towards Israel are evolving, and in a way that's maybe challenging for Israel. For example, last week the most senior Jewish politician in the United States, Chuck Schumer, called for elections in Israel and for the removal of the Netanyahu government, which he felt had been a negative effect on the situation in Israel and Palestine. And then you had, over the weekend, I read in the Sunday Business Post, Marion McKeown had an interview with Nancy Pelosi in which she also criticized, and that wouldn't have criticized Netanyahu and the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza. That wouldn't have happened 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So there is an evolution in American thinking. And I felt it was important that the Irish government, the Taoiseach, should go there last week and sort of add to the pressure that's there for the United States to find a way of persuading Israel to scale back its military operations and to declare a ceasefire, try and have the hostages released, get more humanitarian aid into Gaza, and then somehow conjure up a scenario which could lead to a peaceful settlement. I remember famously Seamus Mallon described the Good Friday Agreement as Sunningdale of 1973, the agreement of 1973-74, Sunningdale for slow learners. In other words, the elements of a solution were there in the 70s, but somehow we weren't able to grab those opportunities at that time. And by the 1990s, things had moved on, and we were ready to move towards a durable peace in Northern Ireland, which is still, of course, being worked on as we speak. And I think the same has to come about ultimately, because there is no future for Israel in having a constant sort of war with its neighbour, the Palestinians, and then having complicated relationships as a result with its Arab neighbours. Far better for Israel would be if they could reach an agreement with all their neighbours. I mean, there was a prize available to Israel there, last year of an agreement with Saudi Arabia to recognise the state of Israel. That would have been a game changer for the whole Middle East. So I think that ultimately has to happen. It's in Israel's interest that it happen. It's obviously in the interest of the Palestinians that they be able to have a state of their own that can give them some prospect for a better life for the people of Gaza and the West Bank.
But it's so urgent now. I mean, is something going to happen soon, and who's going to make it happen? Is it the US or the EU? Or?
Well, the US is the only entity outside of Israel that can actually make anything happen. The EU probably doesn't have the weight that the United States has on the Israeli government. I'm a little surprised that Israel hasn't been more willing to bow to what I'm sure is increasing pressure from Washington for them to scale back their operations in Gaza. But I think it will happen ultimately because the United States is the only country that can prevail upon Israel to change its policy in Gaza.
Let me, if I can add, I'd love to switch back to FDI, but let's put a fine point. I think the attitude in the United States may not be changing to Israel, but the attitude in the United States is clearly changing to the Israeli government. Okay, now, I'm not trying to put too fine a point on that, but there's a big difference. Yep. I think the Israeli government is being examined, and and that's something that's changed certainly. Second thing, I loved being here in Ireland. I loved every minute of my assignment here, but I clearly am an American, and I'm going to ask you to be patient with us as we try to get through this. We have been involved in your peace process. We've been involved in peace processes, which certainly didn't happen quickly, and at some political risk to people in the United States who didn't think we should be involved in the peace process here in Ireland. I think that the U.S. government is currently in the hands of good and compassionate people who are trying to come to a solution to a problem that has existed for a long time. We're committed to a two-state solution to this, and they, as I said before, I think working night and day to come up with something quickly that will last.
Yep, I think that's what we're all hoping for. You wanted to talk about something more upbeat?
Anything, yeah.
Okay. What about the influence of Taylor Swift on Irish culture? I'm just joking, because I have a long list of not so upbeat topics here.
Let me tell you Taylor Swift's story. She came to Ireland while I was the U.S. ambassador, and I guess I can tell the story. So I'm an old guy. I didn't know who she was, and so. But anyway, she was coming. She was performing here, and she was performing in Dublin. And I was asked to meet her as the ambassador, and so I went. And they opened the door, and there was Taylor Swift and me, and she's quite pretty. And we talked for about 20 minutes, and I stayed for her concert. And it was the most uplifting thing I'd ever heard. I mean, there were all these. Her dad was there, and I kind of held on to him because I was the only other man in the whole the whole auditorium with 13-year-old girls, and so I was holding on to Mr. Swift, like don't go away. The songs were so uplifting to those young girls. To be proud of themselves, to be positive, I mean, it was great. So I think that's some American culture I'm proud that we've exported.
I'm not a Swiftie either, but my 9-year-old my 9-year-old granddaughter is already booked to go to one of her concerts this summer. So I'm going to have to take more of an interest in Taylor Swift from now on, so I can guide my granddaughter through her teenage years.
So Alan, DC knows that everywhere I go I say, any Taylor Swift tickets? So if you have Mr. Swift's number, you might get me some tickets. So we're almost out of time, and I suppose one last topic I wanted to touch on was really the polarization of society and politics in both our countries, actually. Yeah. And I think just watching the news over the last week, we can just see maybe the impact of migration in particular on people's views and how they're likely to vote in Irish election, European, US election. So maybe if I can ask you first, have you observed a polarization of politics in Ireland in the last number of years?
Well, I mean, just to say about the United States, I certainly witnessed it there. I mean, historically, I remember thinking that the United States was sort of more or less the Democrats and Republicans were Tweedledee and Tweedledum, whereas in Europe you had a bigger maybe gulf between right and left in European countries. But in recent times, I mean, for example, in the 50s, Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower could have changed places and it wouldn't have made much difference. The problem you have in the United States now is that both sets of supporters believe that the election of the other side is an existential threat to the future of America. I mean, we're having an election here sometime this year, probably late this year, and there could be a significant change of political colour in the future Irish government. But I don't think anybody here sees that as existential. Whereas in America, there's a genuine belief on both sides that the America that they cherish would no longer exist if the other side gets into government. And that's an unfortunate situation. I do think that America is a market leader in many things, in culture, in the economy, and in politics. And I do think that what's happened in America in the last, say, 10 or so years has had an effect around Europe. And we now have several governments in Europe which are kind of the populist right. I'd be concerned about the European Parliament elections in June. I think it's quite likely there will be a significant shift to the right. And a big part of that, of course, is the immigration issue, which is a big issue in the United States. It'll be one of the key issues in the American election. It'll also be a key issue in the elections in the European Parliament, for the European Parliament. And I suspect that it will also be a significant issue in the Irish election coming up later this year. What I think we need is we need a serious discussion about how we cope with these issues. I mean, the populists just say, close our borders. Well, how do you do that? I mean, what do you do when people arrive? So I mean, the simple solutions that the populists are always banging on about just are not solutions. So but we've got to find ways, and this could get worse. I mean, for example, if you had Russia eating up more of Ukrainian territory, you could imagine another outflow of maybe millions of Ukrainians fleeing for refuge in Europe, and that would cause really serious problems all over Europe, including in Ireland, because most European countries are stretched in trying to cope with the number of Ukrainians who've come in the last few years. So, this is not a simple issue. It's a complicated issue. It's a difficult issue, but it requires a serious effort to try and find a solution to it, not just a kind of a knee-jerk populist sloganeering response.
Kevin, I feel we must be able to do it better. Any learnings from the US for us in managing immigration?
So, as I asked for patience before, I would ask, because I know that we're behind, we're delaying what I think what the popular feeling in Ireland would be about Israel and Palestine. Remember, please, in my request for patience, what the United States is doing in the Ukraine. We were there at the first day, and we'll be there at the last day, and they deserve that. The Ukrainians deserve our support, and they'll get our support. So I said earlier, the radicalization of American politics has not been symmetrical, which is a hugely accurate way of describing it. Today in the American political system, the last Republican nominee for president, Mitt Romney, is not welcomed in his own party. John McCain, the one before him, would not be welcomed in his own party. George W. Bush, George G.H. Bush would not be welcomed in today's Republican Party.
Even Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan was the closest president we've ever had to open borders. Okay. Ronald Reagan understood that, though he never said this, but Ronald Reagan understood that of all of the things that the United States has ever done well, and I hope we've done a lot of things well, but the one thing that we've done the best at is immigrants. We're all immigrants. We do that pretty well, okay? We want people coming into our country. We thrived by people coming into our country. Why we've gotten this anti-immigrant thing is the most short-sighted, stupid. Now, do we need to have an orderly way of doing it? Of course we do. Can it be better? Of course it can be. But immigrants are and Ronald Reagan said this many times, that immigration was the lifeblood of America, and he was absolutely 100% right on that. By bringing in the bright people, the hardworking people that are attracted to come to the United States, like my grandparents, on both sides. That's what makes America. That's the secret sauce that's helped us. We have a couple of things that have made the United States very fortunate. One, two very big oceans that separates us from a lot of your problems. Okay, the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean are really good friends of the United States. The second thing is that people want to come into the United States. They see the opportunities that we have. And we need that, and we want that. And this stuff that talking about polluting blood and all that is so reprehensible to us that, anyway. So we do have we are polarized. I don't know the solution to that. We do view that it's an existential. I can stand here, I can sit here today before you and say that the re-election of Donald Trump as President of the United States is a threat to you and to me and to world stability and peace on the planet. Okay, I don't have any problem in saying any of those things. So yeah, it's tough. And if you want to, my version of how all this happened, I'll give you three names. Two of them you'll know. One probably you don't. Rupert Murdoch, Newt Gingrich, the two you probably know, and a fellow by the name of Rush Limbaugh, who took over the American radio system. And these three people have changed America for the worse. For I don't know what the reasons for doing it are. I've got the foggiest notion, but they have changed the United States. They have allowed this. I think they've fostered this sort of hyperbolic. They've really polarized our country and made it less. They've made it more difficult for us to reach the potential that we could reach.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm conscious of time because some people have an appointment with Sky News. So we're going to say thank you very much to everybody who has joined us online. I hope you've enjoyed listening to the two ambassadors.